my name is Claire Gibas, and the book I read for my independent novel was A Midsummer's Night Dream by William Shakespeare. So a little bit about William Shakespeare is that he was born in 1563 in the United Kingdom, and as a child he loved to write, so basically that predicted his future. He's a famous poet and playwright, author, and actor. He wrote plays such as Romeo and Juliet, Hamlet, Macbeth, and so forth. And the main themes that he talked about in his plays, not specifically the one I read, but also the one I read, is tragedy, romance, comedy, conflict, and power. And that's what he really honed in on a lot. So for the plot of the story, there's actually 3 stories in one. The 3 stories are Helena, Hermia, Demetrius, and Lysander. Then there's Oberon, Titania, and the fairies, and then there's Nick Bottom, Peter Quince, and the actors. So this story takes place in Athens, where it begins where Hermia wants to marry Lysander, but her father does not want her to do so. He goes to the king and says, the king, his name's Theseus, she's like, you have to put some steps into my daughter. She's trying to marry the wrong guy, because Aegeus wants Hermia to marry Demetrius instead of Lysander. And as the story goes on, it's just, there's a confusing love square, not even a triangle. As you see here, Hermia is in love with Lysander, but Demetrius is in love with Hermia, but Hermia does not like Demetrius. But the other thing is that Hermia's best friend Helena is in love with Demetrius. So basically, it's just like a big, huge, confusing love square. And Hermia and Lysander try to run away in the forest, and Helena does not want that to happen, so she tells Demetrius. So all 4 of them run into the forest. Then Oberon and Titania, they live in the forest, and is this mythical world or whatever. So they're married. Oberon's the king and Titania is the queen, and they're the king of the fairies and the queen of the fairies. So that's their own story. And then who's also in the forest is Nick Bottom and Peter Quince. They are actors, and they're rehearsing a play for Theseus, who was the king of Athens at the time. And so basically the story is like a bunch of conflict. The forest is all this crazy stuff happens in the forest. Oberon's little sidekick Puck puts magic on everybody and makes people fall in love with other people, and all this crazy conflict. But towards the end, everyone ends up it's a happy ending, basically. So this would have been similar to my visual aid that I would have had for / the interaction portion of class. So it would have been a list of characters, and the arrows wouldn't have been there, but basically it was the people would have to figure out who's with who. For instance, it says that Hermia was with Lysander, but also with Helena, and you know what I mean. So you'd have to connect the arrows and try to figure it out. So main themes in A Midsummer's Night Dream is jealousy. That is the main one. Romance and conflict. So for jealousy, the question that I can pose is it worth your time to envy others because you do not have the same aspects as them? So Shakespeare really focuses on this topic, and it continues throughout the whole story. And he realizes that the reason why people are jealous is because they're not content with themselves, and the reason why people are also jealous is because they want to follow their heart. Their heart is telling them why they like that one thing or why they don't, because what ties into that is makes them do crazy things. And so Shakespeare gives multiple reasons, situations for it. For instance, there's jealousy for love, jealousy for looks, and jealousy of confidence. And some of the irrational decisions that people make because of jealousies. Like, for instance, is like Hermia and Helena. At first, Helena is jealous of Hermia because of her looks and how she's pretty and how she has all these guys, and she is also jealous of her because of the love that she has that Helena does not. But then in the middle of the story, you end up finding that Hermia is jealous of Helena because Puck, the like crazy fairy, makes Demetrius and Lysander fall in love with her. So basically, Hermia's lovers were taken away and given to Helena, so that makes Hermia jealous. Then Demetrius is jealous of Lysander because Lysander gets Hermia and he does not. And another jealousy is Oberon and Titania, because their marriage, they're not having like love interest anymore, so they're falling apart. And so Oberon is jealous because Titania is talking about like other guys, and he's getting jealous because he wants Titania to be his and nobody else's. And then the other one is Nick Bottom, who was one of the actors in the play, and he's very confident, he's very conceited, like he believes that he's like the best out of everybody, but the actors are jealous of his confidence because of how well he performs. Like, he uses that confidence in order to perform, so the actors are jealous that they wish they could be as good as him because he's good, obviously. But as the story goes along, Shakespeare resolves the conflict of jealousy by making each character realize that they must work on themselves instead of focusing on things that instead of being jealous and like realizing what they don't have, he wants them to become content with themselves. So that's when Helena realizes that, yes, I won't be as pretty as Hermia, but I'm just as pretty as like anybody. Like, she's just as good as Hermia in her own, and like in different ways, so he teaches each character, that's just an example, but that they can become content with themselves. But the question that also arises from that is, how does each character resolve their own conflict of jealousy? Because jealousy, there's not like one certain way, like, oh, in order to not be jealous you need to do this. Like, it's different for each situation and how each person is individually. So in one of the literary criticisms, they talk about the woods, and the woods is a very important part of play because that's where everything happens. One of the authors of the literary criticisms wrote, "Events in the wood are like a dreamlike distortion, because as everyone enters the woods, it creates all the problems." Like, for instance, that's in the woods, that's when Puck uses the magic on them, and that's where people are fighting with each other because they're expressing like their feelings and everything, and they're like, oh, blah blah blah, like you can't, blah blah blah, And so, but towards the end of the play, once they leave the forest or the woods, they end up resolving it themselves. So in a way, they needed the forest to resolve their problems, basically. And so the next topic they talked about in the literary criticisms was magic creates the conflict, basically. So the magic, it doesn't create the conflict. I would rather say that it ignites it specifically ignites the jealousy. So like, the jealousy was always there, but now that like the magic that tied in, people are like expressing how they feel, and they're being like honest and real with each other. And so, for instance, like Puck uses the magic on Demetrius and Lysander to make them fall in love with Helena rather than Hermia. So that creates a problem. Puck also uses magic on Titania, which is Oberon's wife, to make her fall in love with Nick Bottom. But Puck also uses magic on Nick Bottom to turn him into a donkey. Like, he has like the head of a donkey. So that's like even more problem, because like, one, he's a donkey, and two, the person that he works for, like Puck's working for Oberon, and he's being mischievous, and he's turning his wife like again, he's and the reason why because at first Oberon orders Puck to simply make Lysander and Demetrius fall in love with Helena because he is sympathetic towards Helena, because he feels that Helena and himself are in the same situation because they both desire love that they can't have. So that's what Puck was originally supposed to do, but then he goes off the handle and starts putting spells all over the place and like creates all these problems. So the next topic they talk about is holding freedom back. So Hermia cannot choose the love that she desires because of society. So Demetrius is like, in the eyes of everyone, the right suitor. He's the good guy. He has money. That's basically, back then it was all focused on like money. And Aegeus, which is her father, he's like, you need to marry Demetrius because he has the money. Like, he will provide for us, blah, blah, blah. But Hermia's like, I don't love him though. Like, I love Lysander because that's what her heart wants. But but society is saying, but like, even though that Demetrius is like the right decision, she's not going to be happy with that decision. So society is holding her back from what she wants to pursue. So another thing is social class. And social class is a big thing that they talk about in literary criticisms as well, because they say that men have the power. Like, they have all the power when women have no power in the story. And that's with like Theseus, who's the king of Athens. Like, he controls like his wife. Oberon tries to control his wife Titania, but there's also like some feminist not views, but like some feminism in there, because Titania's she talks back to like her husband, like she defends herself, which is, so it's trying to give, like, it's showing that women still, like, they can try to, like, yeah. So that's like the difference with them and everything. And the one thing that they really hone in on is that even if you're not in the same class does not mean you're different. So no one's different from anybody else. Like, they talk about how everyone has the same emotions and feelings, and like everybody is human. That it makes you no difference that if you're up at the top, like Theseus and Hippolyta, compared to like Peter Quince and Nick Bottom. And like, actually at the end of the story, they resolve this by stating that because Peter Quince and Nick Bottom perform the play for Theseus, and they end up talking, and they end up, I wouldn't say become friends, but they become civilized and like acquainted with each other, even though that they're on completely different sides of like the spectrum. So it was like a good tie into there. And that's the end of my PowerPoint. So the next thing I'm gonna read a little excerpt about. So this was Helena. This is her soliloquy, and this is what it says. It says, "How happy some are, others some can be. Through Athens I am thought as fair as she, but what of that? Demetrius thinks not so. He will not know but he do know. And as he errs, doting on Hermia's eyes, so I admiring of his qualities. Things base and vile holding no quantity. Love can transpose to form and dignity. Love looks not with the eyes, but with the mind. And therefore is winged Cupid painted blind, nor hath love's mind of any judgment taste, wings and no eyes figured uneasy haste. And therefore love is said to be a child, because in choice he is so oft beguiled. As waggish boys in game themselves forwear, so the boy love is perjured everywhere. For ere Demetrius looked on Hermia's eye, he held down oaths that he was only mine. And when he is hailed, some heat from Hermia's felt, so he dissolved, and showers of oaths did melt. I will go and tell the fair Hermia's flight." So basically, at the beginning of this soliloquy, it talks about how Helena is so infatuated with Demetrius. Like, she cannot get over about how obsessed she is with Demetrius. But Demetrius ignores the fact that Helena likes him. And he doesn't like Helena. And she just wishes that he loved her. And she refuses to accept that he will never love her. Like, she's like, no, like, it'll never happen. And like, as it goes on, she says, this is the line that sticks out, is like, love looks not with the eyes but with the mind. And what she means by that is like, when we're in love, we don't see the faults that are there. We don't, like, if they had, like, for instance, like, Demetrius, like, he doesn't love her, and she doesn't want to accept that fact. Like, she doesn't want to see that fault in him, that she's like, no, like, he'll still love me or whatever. But she says that like love does not have good, but she also talks about how love also doesn't have good judgment either, because in one of the lines she says, and therefore his wing Cupid painted blind, but she means is that like Cupid is blind, so he's going to miss, like he's not going to make the correct decision of who should technically be in love, and he would shoot somebody else, and that's what she thinks. And she said, she also brings up how love is a child because children makes bad decisions, and so does love. And further down in the soliloquy, she talks about how Demetrio broke his promise to Helena. So basically, Demetrius and Helena apparently were like having a fling, but then when Hermia came along, it like messed everything up, and like he became in love with Helena and then Hermia and forgot about Helena. And in the soliloquy, love is capitalized throughout, and the reason why is because like that word is so important, not only to the story, but to each individual character, and it just affects everybody differently. And that's how like he just wants to put the emphasis on love. And so the writing style of this soliloquy, there's like a rhyming scheme, but actually throughout the whole play, it is an unrhymed iambic pentameter, it consists of one short stressed syllable followed by like a long syllable, so it's like a heartbeat. And that's the end of my presentation.